Okay, part 3 of the January Chatting Shit series. This time I'm talking a bit about shadow Pokemon and strategy surrounding them. So the first thing to say is that the 20% attack boost on shadows and the 20% defense drop, or it might be a little lower than that defense drop. Immediately you might think that the Pokemon that would benefit the most from the shadow treatment would be the ones with high attack stats and low defense stats. You know, they're going to benefit, they're going to get the biggest boost percentage wise, raw number wise out of the attack boost, and they're going to suffer the least from the defense drop. So you might think that they'd be sensible Pokemon to use shadow variants of, and generally that is probably a good starting point. I think it's particularly true in a few cases. I think Victreebel and Gardevoir and Shiftry and Zapdos, I think are, off the top of my head, really good examples. Perhaps things like Magnezone and Charizard as well. Because Victreebel and Gardevoir are getting farm downs and things that they might not previously have got because they're killing things just that little bit extra, that little bit quicker, and that might stop your opponent getting to an extra charge move, which is huge. It saves you a shield, or it wins you switch advantage, or whatever. And things like Shiftry and Zapdos, they're not taking hits anyway, so absolutely you may as well have that extra power. Shadow Zapdos is one of my favourite things to use in Great League. I adore the thing. Thunderbolt from Shadow Zapdos is incredible. It's just a shame G-Fisk is so prominent, but anyway, so things that aren't taking hits anyway, like Shiftry and Zapdos, really benefit from that. But there's some other sort of shadowy versions of things that we've seen be really good in Sylph before, sort of on the flimsier side of the spectrum. Things like Swampert, Venusaur, Beedrill, Dragonair. Yeah, Dragonair was awesome in Timeless Cup, wasn't it? Beedrill in Sorceress. Just trying to see if I can think of any more off the top of my head. Gliscor and Gligar in Rose were really good, but they're perhaps a bit bulkier. But yeah, these sorts of things where they're sort of around the sort of 1800 stat product, if you look on PvPoke, these are things that can take a hit. I mean, a hit at best, a hit at best, and certainly not want to take anything super effective. But if the defense drop there means that they can no longer take that hit, that attack boost really needs to be worth it, because if you're not turning, let's take Swampert for example, if something that Hydro Cannon was previously killing in 2 hits, if that's not now killing it in 1 hit, and that defense drop causes you to not be able to take a move, take a charge move that you might otherwise have been able to take, allowing you to get to the second Hydro Cannon, then the shadow boost is doing more harm than good. So I don't think it's quite as clear cut as taking things that are high attack, low defense, sticking a shadow on them and making them even better. I don't think it's quite that clear cut. I think Swampert is one I talked about, which I think is a really interesting example. So I think it depends how you want to use the Pokemon as well. Swampert, despite being the 4 times weak to grass, I quite like it as a safe switch. It's not very safe, obviously, because grasses are a thing. But if you're using a safe switch, you probably lost the lead, and losing the lead and losing the switch, losing the secondary matchup can happen to any team. Like, it's certainly in GBL, where you've got no idea what you're going to face. Any line of 3, any lead and save switch pairing you could possibly dream up has a combination where it will lose the lead and the secondary matchup. So I'm not so worried about that second. I'd rather maximize my chances of being able to flip the ones that I can flip at risk of having some really horrible losses. I'd rather do that than pick something that's perhaps a little bit of a more of a mid-ground. Not that water types are a great example of that because razor leafers exist, but hopefully you get my point. And so using it as a sort of safe swap, I think the shadow there is probably better because it flips a couple of important matchups. Meganium, for example, if you give yourself a 2 mudshot lead, you're gonna get to the sludge wave before Meganium can get to a frenzy plant. Because of the shadow boost, you're gonna kill the Meganium. So you're forcing a shield on your safe switch, which is the point of a safe switch, is to either win switch advantage back or to win a shield advantage. And at that point, the Meganium's locked, so you might have led something like a Skarmory to be able to then take advantage of that Meganium being stuck. The non-shadow version, however, you still get to the sludge wave first, of course, but it doesn't quite do enough to kill. And then you go down to the frenzy plan. So I think that's an example of how, because I'm using it in a certain way, and there's a particular matchup that I've identified, I think it's worth doing. But I also use Swampert. I use Swampert a lot in GBL. If you're using it as a counter switch, and the Skarmory matchup is really interesting. Now this sim here is how I find things tend to go. Maybe I've swapped into the Skarmory. Optimistically, I might only give it 1 air slash of energy. They tend to tank the first Hydro Cannon because they're Skarmory and they're bulky, and that's what Skarmory does. I let the Sky Attack through because I know I can win the ones, and if they go for Brave Bird, I can come in and farm with something. And then I get to the second Hydro Cannon, which they shield because they're scared. Now, by the time they get to the second Sky Attack, I'm at low health, and they don't want to throw their energy. They want to save it and go for the farm down. So quite often, I get to the third Hydro Cannon while they try and farm me down. And that then means I've either kept switch and got a shield advantage, which is immense, or they have to shield again, and I've taken 2 shields. Both of which are great positions to be in. The shadow version, however, because of the extra power on the Hydro Cannons is not helping me in the first 1 or 2, and given that the third one killed previously, it's not helping me in the third either. However, the defense drop means that I am farmed down, and the Skarmory comes out with quite a lot of energy. Now, yes, of course, I'm a shield up, but the likelihood is that if I've swapped Swampert into the Skarmory, I haven't got anything that wants to take a Brave Bird, so I'm going to have to give that shield back. Now, yeah, I might play out the ones. I might shield the Sky Attack with Skarmory with the Shadow, but I don't like shielding first because then your opponent can not shield, and they've done their job as a safe swap, and they've taken a shield advantage. So as a counter switch, it doesn't work quite as well in this instance. So yeah, I think there's an interesting dynamic of how you want to use a Pokemon might affect whether you prefer the shadow or not, and there's often grey areas. I think Lapras and Abomasnow are interesting ones as well, because if you've got the shadow versions of those, you can switch into Stunfisk as long as you're quick and beat Galarian Stunfisk. So if you're planning on using them as sort of counter swaps, they're better there. However, if you can use them as a safe swap with an energy advantage, the base forms, the non-shadow forms, might be able to win those matchups. And certainly on Lapras, the extra bulk might be more useful than the extra damage output. But again, it's going to be dependent on how you're going to use it and what you're expecting to see. Certainly in Sylph, less so in GBL, because it's a bit more. You have to sort of prepare for the Masters, I guess, don't you? But yeah, it's certainly something to consider in Sylph, is how you're planning on, or how you foresee yourself using the Pokemon, and then weighing up whether the shadow's better or not. So how I like to identify a good shadow Pokemon, or how I might choose to run a shadow variant over a non-shadow, is how is that Pokemon beating its opponents. Am I fast moving, am I farming something down with fast moves and double shielding, or am I out spamming? So something like a Gardevoir or a Shadow Vic might do that. Am I out spamming things and using lots of shield pressure like a Politoed? Is it a mixture of decent fast move damage and decent charge move damage? That's something like Lapras. Or am I sat there out bulking something like Jumpluff, something like that? So I think about the Pokemon. I think about how I'm winning matchups, and I'm asking myself whether having the shadow stat changes helps me with that. So obviously with things like Vix, Dribble, and Gardevoir, as we discussed, it helps with that. It helps with them. It helps with things like Zapdos and Shiftry. I think good examples of where it helps as well are Hypno and Machamp, because that then increases their ability to be played. It increases their two-shield matchups. Now you might not want to use them as two-shield matchups, in which case, you might not want to run the shadow. But certainly, I feel like the appeal of things like Hypno and Machamp, where they've got a strong fast move with low energy charge moves that you can get to 2 or 3 of, and people might not want to shield anyway. The appeal of those sort of mons is that they have good two-shield matchups, generally speaking. So the shadow's helpful there a lot of the time. But if you're looking at things that are hoping to sort of outbulk or outspam or out-annoy things, so things like Jumpluff, Dusclops from Sinister was perhaps a good example, where particularly one Pokemon where the attacks you're using aren't brilliant. So Dusclops get Shadow Punch, Ice Punch. Jumpluff, yeah, Energy Ball's decent. Aerial Ace is absolute garbage, and Bullet Seed isn't doing huge amounts of damage anyway, so the Shadow Boost isn't gonna help there. These sort of annoying mons that are just you just try and outlast your opponent by having the defense drop and not really benefiting a great deal from the attack buff, because the attacks are that bad, probably hindering your ability to do that. Now, a lot of those are sort of out bulky type Pokemon tend to be sort of soft counters to most things. Or certainly the reason why you'd use them is because they are soft counters to a lot of things. So it sort of stands to reason perhaps that if they're the ones you don't want to be using shadow versions of, maybe you do want to be using shadow versions of sort of hard countering mons. I think Charizard is a real good example of this. It's an example here's one I prepared earlier sort of thing, with Abomasnow. So here's a sim with standard vanilla Charizard versus vanilla Abomasnow. If you go for the farm down, if you give in the Abomasnow 2 turns of Powder Snow energy, the IVs that this Charizard and this Abomasnow have, Abomasnow is going to get to the second Powder Snow, so it's either going to force a shield, or force you to throw first, or force you to lose that matchup, which isn't great. You know, you can still win that matchup by shielding the second Powder Snow, but you're not really taking advantage of it as you might want to with a hard counter. If, however, that Charizard becomes Shadow, you can see it's the perfect scenario. You farm down, you don't have to shield, you come out at really low health, and you've got a Blast Burn ready to throw at the next thing, and there's nothing that's going to enjoy taking a Blast Burn. Like, only Rock Water types. If your opponent's got an Omastar, they might enjoy taking a Blast Burn. Fine, you know. But even then, you've already done your job anyway. So that Blast Burn damage is extra anyway, really. So I think just more generally, knowing how you're going to win is it's a huge part of the strategy of this game. You want your Pokemon to synergize well with each other. Like the success of Grassol is built sort of, at least in part, on the fact that that combination of three Pokemon, you know, Bastiodon, Shadow Vic, and then maybe Shadow Tropius, or not Shadow Tropius, Razorleaf Tropius, or Razorleaf Cherim. It's built partially around the fact that they're bypassing the opponent's ability to use shields. So like, for example, if the first two are Bastiodon and Tropius, they're unlikely to get many shields out of you. But you're going to get shields out of them. So if their last Pokemon was then something like a Politoed, you've still got shields left because Bastiodon and Tropius haven't been, you know, spamming charge moves at you. So because you've still got shields left, that Politoed isn't going to get to fire off its weather balls, and even if it does fire them off and get your shields back, get your shields off you, Tropius and Bastiodon are really going to struggle to exploit that because they're not firing off charge moves themselves. So it's nice that the three sort of Grasshopper Pokemon all work together like that. And you know, similarly, that word, the sort of weather ball spam teams exploit you in the opposite way, where you can only shield 2 moves all game, and they might fire, I don't know, 4, 5 charge moves each on a bad day. You know, so they're exploiting you the opposite way around. You know, if you've led a Politoed, bent both your opponent's shields, the best way to take advantage of that is by firing off loads more charge moves, not sitting there with a Bastiodon and doing Smackdown, or a Wigglytuff with Charm. I'm going to be going for fast charging moves that are going to do a load of damage quick. So again, that sort of thinking, that sort of strategy is going to help. And different metas, you know, different approaches suit different metas better. Sorcerer's Cup, I think, is a good example of certainly the way I played it, where I wanted to, rather than trying to be aggressive early on, generally I just wanted to stay in the game, make the game as long as possible, hold on to my shields for as long as possible, because the longer the game goes on, the more information you have, and the more information you have, the more likely it is that you can find your win condition and play to it. So with that in mind, it wouldn't have made sense to me to use Shadows in Sorcerer's Cup, because having that defense drop is going to make me more likely to need to use my shields early on, and that just wasn't how I wanted to play. Complete opposite end of that spectrum, Nightfall Cup. Nightfall Cup generally had frailer Pokemon than Sorcerer's Cup, and the bulky ones often had the potential to be sort of one-shot by big moves. So Noctowl could be one-shot or very close to it by Frostlass. Wigglytuff could be one-shot or very close to it by Venusaur. You know, this sort of thing. So I wanted to play quite aggressively and burn shields as fast as I could. Burn my opponent's shield, that is. I mean, yeah, I might have to burn my own shields at the same time, but I was trying to play more aggressively, so that sort of, and it's a trade I'm willing to take. So that was a situation where using shadows was beneficial to how I was going to win. So I ran the Shadow Gallade, which was amazing, and Shadow Lapras, which was also amazing when I used it. Yeah, so I think ultimately, whether you're using shadows or not, rather than just picking them because they increase your attack, or not picking them because they lower your defense, think about how that Pokemon wins its matchups. Think about how that fits into your strategy of how you're going to play it, and whether that plays to your strategy strengths or whether it makes it more of a liability. Base your decisions on that, I guess. As I say, bulkier Pokemon tend to lose out. Frailer Pokemon tend to benefit on the whole. That's probably a decent rule of thumb. But then things like Hypno, which is super bulky. Shadow Hypno is awesome because that little bit of extra power flips a lot of matchups. Like, you can then counter Confusion down AWAC with the Shadow with 2 shields, which is huge. I think it's a huge help versus Azumarill as well. And so sometimes there comes a point, I think I spoke about it in the last episode, there comes a point with bulk where that little bit of extra you've got isn't really worth much. So, if you find a Pokemon like Hypno, where you often find that you're not dying to fast moves, you're dying to charge moves that are doing 30% or something like that, maybe it's worth trying it out with that little bit of lower defense. Taking those hits a little bit harder and dealing out a bit more damage. Yeah, that's about it really. People, there's a lot of complaints about shadows because they play more. Well, naturally, they play more aggressively than the non-shadows, and the ones we see a lot of, certainly in GBL, are Victory Bell, Machamp, Hypno, and yeah, they do play a bit more aggressively, but that's not because they are shadows and that's how shadows are and all shadows are like that. It's just those specific ones. I think things like Shadow Lapras, Shadow Hypno, maybe Shadow Skarmory, it's not one I've looked into. They can turn into different mons almost. Like Hypno, as I say, becomes amazing 2 shields. Lapras, it probably flips a lot of 1 shield matchups the other way, so it might win some it loses and lose some it wins. A Skarmory, it keeps its ability to hard counter things. It becomes less of a generalist, but much more of a closer. Like a shadow boosted Brave Bird is going to hurt a lot of stuff. So yeah, I think the shadow is a really interesting mechanic. I think it can be used really well, but I think it takes a lot more. I think it can be taken advantage of a lot better with a little bit of thought. Certainly more thought than people possibly put into it. So yeah, that's just my thoughts on it. And hopefully we'll be back soon with the new meta and standard chatting ship practice will be resumed. Catch you later.